Good morning. No, okay. This morning's reading is taken from a long list of quotes, short ones, some a little bit longer, that were used in the covenant group this year. And I think you're going to recognize some of these if you were in a covenant group this year. So if you've heard this, it never hurts to hear it again. Service seems like a basic, simple concept. We help someone or some group, but it's actually quite complex spiritually, emotionally, and culturally for both the server and those being served. Just think of all the meanings around the word servant, and you begin to get that idea. Doing for others, giving back, altruism, self-sacrifice, giving rather than receiving, responsibility, duty, guilt, helping hands, other-focused, unselfish. The list of thoughts and feelings and states of being goes on and on when you describe serving others. Our UU principles proclaim the inherent worth and dignity of every person and call for justice, equality, and compassion in human relationships. Our own congregational covenant promises that we shall strive toward these principles through worship, study, and service. Albert Einstein wrote, "Without deep reflection, one knows from daily life that one exists for other people. Only a life lived for others is a life worthwhile." There is nothing to make you like other human beings so much as doing for them. Joy can be real only if people look upon their lives as a service and have a definite object of life outside themselves, their personality and happiness. That's Leo Tolstoy. We work on ourselves in order to help others, but also we help others in order to work on ourselves. Never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time and always start with the person closest to you. Mother Teresa. We are in this world to make it better, to lift it to a higher level of enjoyment and progress, and there is indeed a certain amount of responsibility resting upon each of us, from the least to the greatest. "I'm not always sure how to be of service," wrote Terry Pacty. "All I know is that when I hear of another's pains, I feel compelled to act. But when it's best and only thing I can do is to listen, I can do that." So then, really, if the only thing is to serve, sometimes it just means to listen. And Walt Whitman wrote, "I am larger and better than I thought. I did not think I had this much goodness in me." Today's service, or the theme of today's service, began as a conversation over lunch earlier this year. My friend and I were both bemoaning the fact that here it was, 2012, and neither of us had a spiritual practice beyond the coming to church each week. Our conversation continued as we ate, and we talked about our hopes for each of the committees we served on and the work that we did, and what we did well and what we didn't do so very well, and the work that was not obvious, like filling sacks for the food pantry, or the work that was obvious, like standing up here. It occurred to us at dessert that we probably did have a spiritual practice after all. Coming to church, yes, but also serving. Today's presenters have accepted the worship committee's offer to speak to this concept, and I will be happy to introduce you to these three. And remember, if in our service we give in the joy of doing, not expecting rewards or even recognition, if we give from this solitude, this practice, it becomes a spiritual practice, even a prayer. Our first speaker is Nancy Cushman. After retiring from the Emma Willard School, a girls' boarding school in Troy, New York, she and her late husband, Jack, moved to Albuquerque in 2001. Nancy wanted a warmer climate and less harsh winters. and Jack and she both loved the cultural diversity of New Mexico. Soon after their move, they joined this church. As you will hear, Nancy jumped right into the service of doing. Our second speaker is Sharon Hall. She is the founder and facilitator of First Unitarian's Animal Advocates. She moved back to Albuquerque in 2009 after a career of almost 30 years with the city and county of San Francisco, California. Sharon and her mother, Lou Graham, share a home with their dog Holly and numerous resident and foster cats. Our last speaker is Tom Wolford. Tom has been a member of First Unitarian since 2004. He sings with the church band, Spare Parts, and is serving the second term as a church board member. He is the father of 2 wonderful sons. I've met them. Nancy.
Good morning. I joined this church in 2001 as a first-time UU. I grew up in the Congregational Church, and as a young teen, I was very involved in my religion. I had a picture of Jesus that I kept on my bedroom windowsill. Every night, I knelt down by that picture and said the Lord's Prayer. I also prayed that I would do well on tomorrow's test. I even asked God to bring my dog home when he escaped to hunt females. Praying meant God would protect my loved ones and me. While I did join other congregational churches as a young adult, I did not give much thought to my religious beliefs until, and some of you may find this ironic, I joined this church. I joined hoping to find friends who were open to many ideas. To my surprise, I found a spiritual community that makes me think about my own beliefs. I tell you this to let you know I think of myself as a spiritual novice. When Dawn asked me to participate in this sermon on services prayer, I had no idea what I was going to say today. Well, the one area I knew I could speak about is meditation. I have a confession to make. I can't do sitting meditation. During our time of silence, I find my mind drifting off to other things, or I enjoy the desert willow that I can usually see from where I sit. I'm a covenant group facilitator, but I dread the 3 minutes of silence that we share during each meeting. I often cut it down to 2 minutes. Another confession. Maybe I'm in the wrong church. However, I realized that I do meditate in my own way. In 2001, I happened to tell Rod Groves, a church member, that I was a gardener living in an apartment. 2 days later, he called and asked me to chair the grounds committee and to sit on the buildings and grounds committee. With a great deal of reservation about how little I knew of New Mexico gardening, I said yes. It was the beginning of my spiritual journey. I now realize that when I'm in our beautiful garden, digging in the dirt, deadheading flowers, or planting bushes, I am totally involved in that project. I forget all the other things I have to do. I put my worries aside. I'm in the moment. This is my prayer, my form of meditation. I experience that same feeling of being in the moment, happy with who I am, during covenant group meetings. In 2002, my late husband Jack and I took over organizing Project Share. Project Share is a soup kitchen for the homeless and hungry, where our church prepares an evening meal whenever there is a 5th Saturday in a month. I feel both blessed for what I have and honored to be allowed to serve when I watch the many families come through that food line. I believe that work is my prayer. Okay, those definitions of prayer are apparent to me, but what about the other things I do as service to the church? In addition to serving on buildings and grounds, I've served on the program council, the program team, and the board. I presently serve as a covenant group facilitator, convener of the landscape committee, and chair of the leadership succession committee. I want to be a vital part of this congregation and give back to this church that has sustained me in good and bad times. But how is that doing prayer? I don't know about you, but I rarely find meetings to be meditative. I usually have a million thoughts going through my head, and I find it hard to sleep after evening meetings. I serve to make myself feel useful, to apply my skills where they are needed. But now that I've given it some thought, I realize service is my prayer. Service fills me. It helps me feel more complete and yet takes me out of myself. I get far more than I give. My service has sustained me through the difficult years since my husband's death and has made me feel more fully human. Surely that is my prayer. Because of my service, I often sit in this sanctuary on a Sunday morning, so grateful for the amazing people I have met through my various committee memberships. That is my prayer. I feel more fully human. As Jennifer Friedman said 2 weeks ago in this very sanctuary, I am exactly who I need to be right now. That is my prayer. Service is the cornerstone of my spiritual practice. As the wise sage Tagore has said, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and saw that life was service. I acted, and behold, service was joy. Joy is my prayer.
Good morning. I hope you will forgive me for reading much of this. I'm actually terrified of public speaking, but I could not refuse the honor of talking with you here today about my spiritual journey here at First Unitarian and with animal advocates. I was fortunate to have been born to parents who both had a strong sense of social justice and a love of animals. We joined the Unitarian Church in Lincoln, Nebraska when I was barely into high school. Mom had taken us to several churches because she liked to sing in the choirs. Dad, however, would not join us on Sundays until he heard the eloquent Reverend Charles Stevens and discovered so many other university faculty families gathered at the Unitarian Church. We had found our liberal religious home. Fast forward many decades. In planning my retirement from the city and county of San Francisco back to my hometown of Albuquerque, I realized that I could finally follow my bliss full-time. What had begun as a love for the family dog and the family cat had grown into a keen interest and ultimately a full-blown passion for animal advocacy and animal welfare. Less than a month after I arrived in Albuquerque, Mom and I joined First Unitarian. I immersed myself in life here, a covenant group, an extended family, and helping establish the adult ESL program. Coincidentally, Ursula Biggers and I had both done our graduate work in ESL at San Francisco State. My crucial other life, however, was volunteering with the local animal welfare groups. Then, the miracle, serendipity, synchronicity. While casually browsing the web one day, I discovered the National Unitarian Universalist Animal Ministry. And there was even a section on how to start a local chapter. It was the answer to a deep, unspoken prayer and the beginning of a path of so many blessings. the opportunity to be of service to my new First Unitarian family as well as to the animals, and to help deepen our connection to the seventh principle, recognizing the beauty and interconnectedness of all species in the web of life. Sorry for getting. In 2010, with the approval of the UUAM and Reverend Christine Robinson, we were welcomed into the First Unitarian community. Every Sunday now, we set up our information table in silent prayer and gratitude that we might be of assistance to someone who has a question about feral cats, someone who wants to talk about protecting wildlife, or someone who needs a hand in finding a home for a beloved companion animal. As members of Animal Advocates, our communion, our prayer, our Thanksgiving is not just a Sunday thing, but an ongoing process of planning humane education forums, special events, field trips, of basically trying to sow some seeds, any seeds, which might make this world a better place for all beings. Everyone in this room knows, however, that the hardest part about caring is trying to salvage spirit and hope when we meet discouragement or even heartbreak. That becomes our prayer as well. However, we have been fortunate to have had some incredible inspiration along the way. Speakers like Dr. Will Tuttle, Dr. Melanie Joy, Reverend Gary Kowalski have graced our social hall with their words of wisdom and their unwavering commitment to creating a world where the worth and dignity of every being is realized. And there are so many of you here in this congregation who rescue, volunteer, foster, donate time, money, and energy to helping your fellow creatures. You are our heroes, and your message is our prayer. Although I chair Animal Advocates, and you probably see me chatting away in the courtyard every Sunday, I'm actually a fairly shy, introverted person. My deepest and most personal bliss comes in very private moments. Holding one of the soft, sweet kittens I got to foster for Lisa Goldman recently, listening to the songs of the wolves as we camped at the Wild Spirit Wolf Sanctuary, sharing a quiet walk with our dog Holly. These moments are my prayer. We are such a compassionate, generous, committed community here at First Unitarian, and not just community. We are a team, a family. Our annual Animal Blessing Service is one awesome day of prayer, love, joy, and gratitude for us. This congregation's feeling for animals and your support of Animal Advocates is a continual blessing, and we have tried to return that love and support by partnering with other church committees and working on special events and causes with you. It's the cooperation, this coming together for any greater good, that enriches and blesses us in so many amazing and unexpected ways. I would now like to read a short statement from current UUA President Peter Morales. Quote, "Spiritual growth is perhaps best described as developing our sense of compassion and our awareness of the connections which unite us to one another and to the universe. Our capacity to love and our capacity to act ethically are founded on our compassion, literally the capacity to suffer with. Our awareness of our connections to one another, to all life, to the universe, is the other great pillar of spiritual maturity. When we see that the divisions we create are false and lead to suffering, we have reached a higher awareness. We are one with all humanity and all creation. The realization that how we treat animals is an ethical issue grows out of this spirituality of compassion and awareness of connection. There is no reason compassion should stop at human beings. Our sense of connection must go beyond the human as well." Unquote. And so our Animal Advocates work is a prayer that we can be a part of that connection, that we can make a difference. It's also a prayer which has been answered, that we are able to travel a path with the heart. Thank you.
A while back, Christine Robinson, our senior minister, related a humorous anecdote that's gone around for some time about an interfaith minister at a meeting who says, "Let us pray, and you Unitarian Universalists do whatever it is you do." I was raised Latter-day Saint. I was taught that traditional prayer, framed with true faith to the traditional God, was supposed to work literal miracles, but also that faith was manifested by action, and that prayers were more likely to be answered when accompanied by work. Nowadays, I don't buy into the concept of the traditional God, and I find myself unable to engage in the kind of prayer I used to. In fact, I'm what you might call a soft atheist. I don't really believe that there is any conscious entity listening, let alone caring enough to do anything about what it hears from us. However, I do still possess a sense of reverence. I do find myself in meditative moods on occasion, which can be very prayer-like, and I find that I am still a religious person. I use that expression deliberately. I am a religious person. By this I mean that I find meaning, purpose, solace, reverence, and goodness in belonging to and serving in a faith community. Service to a faith community is my religious practice. I might even be able to call it a form of prayer. If connection to something larger than myself is what prayer is about, then service and prayer go hand in hand. Now, I've got my limits. For one thing, not just any faith community will do. If there's a strong doctrinal structure, it's not going to work for me, which is why Unitarian Universalism is so appealing. Here, where freedom of conscience is paramount, we are free to serve as we feel inclined or called, if that's the word you choose. In addition, I'm very picky about what sorts of service I will and will not give. I'm nowhere near the disciple of Christ, the ideal kind, who gives away all his possessions and spends all his time serving others. Nor am I one who readily joins causes. As a skeptic, I have to look at things critically and carefully before I approve enough to give them my time. I guess I'm a rather selfish servant. I am fairly self-aware, and I have a pretty good idea of about how much time I can spend with people before my energy is spent, and I'm cautious about spending it. But I have found a number of things here in my time at First Unitarian, which, by the way, is my first and only UU congregation, in which the gears of giving and receiving service meshed well for a time. The first solid service I gave was to the CUPS group, the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans, whose local chapter is called Coyote Willow. That was during my first 2 years here, where I was still fishing about in these intriguing waters and wasn't entirely sure what my spirituality was. The group was small, the old leadership was burning out, and things needed doing and people to do them. I served as the secretary 1 year and then chapter chair the next year. Before long, I realized I wasn't really pagan at heart, but I do have a soft spot for paganism. So I stepped down after 1 full term as chair. But during those 2 years, I felt I was doing something meaningful. People of faith needed service, and it was the kind of service I was willing and able to give during that particular time. Lately, I've been serving in the church as both a musician and a board member. This has been quite the adventure. I've been using multiple skill sets, been stretched a little, and been highly rewarded. In music, I get to use one of my talents to help set the tone for everyone's worship together and see the happy faces that result in the moment. Plus, I'm part of the moment, experiencing the magic that music makes, along with everyone else, so I'm receiving some of what I'm giving. On the board, I get involved in how the church works at an organizational level and participate in a part of the church's democratic government. We identify some of the problems that beset the church as a whole and try to find ways to solve those problems. I guess I get to help make the church what it is to so many people. Between these two very different types of service, I get to be involved in both the details and the big picture, and I find that very satisfying. I'm giving meaningful service to people of faith. That's my religion, and that's how I participate in worship with you. Now, from what I've said so far, I can extract a few principles. Service is prayerful when it is meaningful and given willingly. Grudging service is pointless. Service given because you believe in what you're doing connects you to the people you're serving and those you are serving with. And that's communion with the divine. That's prayer. In any kind of service, the gears of giving and the gears of receiving have to mesh, or it's not a very prayerful or worshipful or even useful experience. It's just frustrating. So identifying what you have to give and what the other person needs can sometimes reduce that frustration. When you don't know what you have to give or what is needed on the other end, it can sometimes work to just dive in and try something and learn whatever you learn from the experience. Only when you see signs of it being detrimental to yourself or the other, you make a graceful exit. An analogy to traditional prayer: when the ache in your knees is distracting you from communion with God, it's time to get up and do something else. Ditto if you notice everyone around you holding their ears. No one is an infinite well with an infinite supply. No one can give forever, and no one can give meaningfully to everyone. Some folks may have the calling or the drive to give of themselves until they are empty. I am not one of them. I have to take time out to replenish my reserves, or I am no use to anyone. I believe that service and worship should tend to happiness for everyone involved, and that means sometimes taking a break. It also sometimes means saying no. I turned down a board position several years ago because I was not yet in a position to give in that manner, and I knew it would break me if I did it then. Later, when the opportunity came around again, I knew I was ready, and I accepted. I'm glad I said no the first time, and I'm glad I said yes the second time. Trust me, both events were a service to myself and to the church. Every kind of service has its seasons. Some may be long and others short. Some wells are deeper than others, and some needs are greater than others, and people burn out doing some things faster than doing other things. When the gears of giving and receiving do mesh, they may not stay connected forever. I've noticed in my life that it's important for me to pay attention to these seasons. When my service is no longer meaningful or satisfying, it's time to back out, rejuvenate, and find a new service that provides that meaning I seek. Service also has a way of taking you out of your comfort zone, getting you to try new things that maybe you're nervous about trying, stretching your capabilities, and sometimes even making you rub shoulders with people you might normally avoid. All of these are opportunities for growth and generally make us better people. They may also be times to test your principles. I'll let you in on a little secret. I don't necessarily have to believe every word of every song I sing to you from this platform. If I believe in the general message of the song and figure that someone in the congregation will resonate with what I'm singing, then I'm happy to contribute to that person's worship experience and get caught up in the feeling of the song, even if there are a few phrases that I don't personally agree with. It's not about me, it's about all of us together. Only if a song contains a message that I have serious misgivings about will I decline to sing it. Numerous people, including some philosophers and musicians, have said something along the lines of, "Life has no meaning but the meaning you give it." I believe that. And I find that I am best able to give meaning to life by serving a community of faith. This is how I find contentment for that part of me that wants to connect to something bigger. Service is a way for even an atheist to pray.
Thank you, Tom. Remember, our generosity sustains this hallowed place, which is important to all of us, as we have demonstrated by making the commitment to build a new sanctuary, groundbreaking on July 22nd.